Hey everyone, welcome to Conversations with me, Peter Boghossian, and I'm delighted to welcome veteran businessman and free speech advocate Chuck Davis to the podcast. Chuck is a business manager and consultant, and he's developed organizational systems for Goldman Sachs and other leading firms. He served as an Army combat engineer in Germany during Operation Desert Storm, where he's awarded the Bronze Star Medal. Chuck, we should talk about that too. Chuck was appointed the president and board of chair of Alumni Free Speech Alliance in January this year. Previously, he was president of MIT's Free Speech Alliance. So thanks for joining me, Chuck. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter. Glad to be here.
Cool. Okay, so let's start with the problem of free speech and expression in universities. Why should people value free speech? Who cares?
Everybody wants to talk.
But what if some people have either nothing to say or toxic, poisonous nonsense?
Who gets to decide? I mean, that's the key I think, what is it, Lenin that said, it doesn't matter who gets to vote, it matters who counts the votes, right? You may think I'm full of nonsense, right? Don't listen. But the point is, I don't trust anyone with that amount of power.
What's wrong with just saying to someone, though, if your speech is hurtful, it hurts other people, if your speech leads to violence, then you shouldn't be allowed to say it? Is there anything wrong with that?
Well, there's two ways you could answer that. I mean, there's a whole philosophical issue of wrong, but there's also, we have pretty good legal precedents in the U.S. Speech that's imminently insightful to violence, harassment, defamation, and all is not protected. Speech that you don't like isn't, and you don't like it because you think it's harmful or whatever. It's just a pretty settled law, right? Now, I'm not advocating being uncivil, right? And this is where I think people tend to lose it. Is I don't like what you say. I may even not like how you say it, and I think that's sufficient grounds to use the power of an institution to shut you down.
Right. So the people now, for example, and you do a lot of work on college campuses, we'll talk about that in a minute. The people now who want to shut down speech, and just as an example for myself, I was told that I was not allowed to render my opinion about protected classes or teach in such a way that my opinion about protected classes could be known. And I actually asked about that in the meeting. I just found that to be shocking on so many levels, particularly since I was teaching ethics classes.
You were in a public university, right?
Correct. I was in a public university. So before you took the helm of the Free Speech Alliance, or the Alumni Free Speech Alliance, so tell me, what is the relationship of the alumni to free speech, and do you think that they can leverage their positions to influence the university?
Well, we hope so. I mean, it hasn't been tried before. So one of the kind of phrases I've kind of settled on is almost like the AFSA value proposition of what is it about the alumni movement. And it's the idea that a group of school-focused alumni who are interested and invested are potentially the necessary element that's been missing to affect real change on campus. I mean, FIRE's been around a long time. They originally started as free speech on campus. ACLU before they kind of lost the thread. There's a lot of other organizations, but it's not getting any better. And so part of the question I ask is, coming from my background as an engineer and business person where I work on processes, if you're doing something and it's not working, what do you need to do different? Right. And I think having alumni involved, alumni are the natural constituency of a university, right? Having them involved is perhaps the missing element, and that's what we're giving a shot at.
Yeah, I agree that alumni is key. And Reed, could you please pull up the NPA project that we did, the Stop Donating? So I'd like your opinion about this. So I think we are in lockstep in terms of what the problem is. What we may disagree on, I don't know, I have to pick your brain. The problem is free speech. We may disagree on the logistics of how to get there. So we have this program, it should be the easiest ask in the world. We identified, I think, the top 10 schools that were on FIRE's list of schools that inhibit or were bad for free speech and free expression. And we asked alumni, which literally everybody asks you to give money. We asked for exactly the opposite. Just stop giving them money. Just live. What? So my first comment is, what do you think about that?
I'm a little bit skeptical at large, heavily endowed schools. Right now, we've got a little bit of feedback. It is making a dent at MIT. It has come out that they missed their targets last year, and of course, that was following a large cancellation that led to the founding
Dorian
of MIT.
Abbott.
Yes, the Abbott affair, as it's known. So their donations are down. We know that because we know people on the alumni committees, right? But there's another option too, right? Which is, and again, I'll reference what was done when I was the president of the MIT Free Speech Alliance, and I am still on the board there, is through Donors Trust, we set up what we named the Concerned Donors Fund. And when we were challenged on this by the Alumni Association as being, well, that's, you're not supporting MIT because you're asking people not to donate and donate here. We said, no, actually, au contraire, this is a means for people who have already stopped donating to contribute to the university, right?
Oh, no, that's terrible. What? Explain that. Oh my God, that gives me a heart attack. That undoes all my work. Why?
No, because now by giving to the Concerned Donor Fund, which is managed through Donors Trust, and the grants are selected by the MIT Free Speech Alliance board, you can give to MIT knowing and being confident that the funds will be used only in a way that's meant to support free speech. Like, so for example, you want to donate directly to support a student free speech group, or for a speaker series that's going to invite previously canceled people to campus, right? There is a way to do that. You can still support the activities that you care about at your university without making an unrestricted donation.
Okay, I guess my problem with that is that as long as there's a diversity, equity, and inclusion board at the university, there will be no free speech. I mean, that the whole point of the Office of DEI is to limit speech. So
you went straight there, didn't you?
Yeah, because it's just so glaring and conspicuous to me. So I don't know why you would want to give money to an institution. Like, I'm trying to think of a jujitsu metaphor. I can't think of one. It's like, I don't know.
Well, so Peter, think about the one example that I gave, right? Instead of giving money to an institution that can then give some of it maybe perhaps to the student association, who can then give maybe some of it perhaps to the student groups that you want to support. You give the money straight to the student groups that you want to support. No, it never goes through the university.
No, that's fallacious, because as long as a speaker is on campus that they don't like, they can, do things that, say the rooms. I mean, they can do exactly what they've done to me. They can place every conceivable obstacle if they say that the speech is harmful, or they can demand disinvitations, less. So I don't know how that could possibly be. I'm missing something. Lay out, what's your reasoning? Yeah.
Okay. The reasoning there was, it was fairly bespoke to that situation. It was something the MIT group came up with. You talked about whether we might agree or disagree on tactics. I'm generally, if there's not violence involved, I'm not going to say no to almost any tactic. My approach tends to be yes and, right? So for example, and I'm by no means soft on the universities in terms of what we should do. So for example, we all know about what happened with the Federalist Society at Yale and Stanford, right? We can talk about more different aspects of that later. My reaction, and I was surprised it took so long to get here, was simply to go, the Federalist Society should sue both Yale and Stanford. I think they probably still could. There's obvious damages. You relied on promises that weren't kept. You incurred cost. And I had lawyers obviously go, what's the point? They're just going to write you a check. I'm like, that's not the point. The money isn't the point. The point is to start developing muscle memory that every time you do something like this, you allow something like this to happen, you are going to write a check, and you're going to have to officially and formally acknowledge that what you did was wrong. Right? That's just one small thing. But what I generally find is I don't think people who are fighting back effectively or enough. And that's one of the ways that I want to help is create better, easier, lower bars to actually fighting back.
Yeah, I'm super sympathetic to that. I like legitimately, I'm not just, that's not verbal behavior. Like I'm genuinely sympathetic, but as long as there's an office of DEI, wouldn't the better strategy be to suffocate them, to just literally strangle them to death?
Yes.
Okay. So if that's the better strategy, then isn't the way to accomplish that strategy to have a stop donating campaign? So I have an idea of something we were going to pull the trigger on, but we're a small nonprofit. We run on donations. So maybe I can, maybe I can ask you this, and you can help my audience with this. So here's the idea. So and I'm going to use Portland State as a great example of this. So Portland State, in my opinion, has gone to crazyville, right? The whole place is suffering from a mass institutional derangement. And that's been embedded in their faculty governance, their procedures, their DEI, everything, the president, the selection of the president. I mean, I don't, everything. Okay.
So I understand how that works. Yes.
Okay. So let's say that we want to deal with this in a meaningful way. And what I mean by dealing with this is it would be better if Portland State University did not exist in terms of the outcomes. They're giving students degrees that basically they're backwards guides to reality. They're creating the degree. They're doing a tremendous injustice to people. They're doing a tremendous injustice to the community. Not wholly. I mean, there are exceptions to that, but by and large, it would be better if they stopped existing, because they'd stop pumping out toxic, divisive madness to the society, which then infects it mimetically. So let's say that somebody is a graduate of Portland State University. Now, I think you'll agree with me that most graduates, unless they were recent graduates, don't understand the degree of ideological capture. Would you agree?
We are finding that to be really true.
Okay. So here's my idea. You tell me what you think of it, and then it would be great if you could tell me how we could accomplish this. How does somebody go about getting a donor list for the top 50 people who donated institutions to Portland State University, finding those people and going into their offices and just setting up meetings with them, whoever it is, for a one-on-one, face-to-face conversation, and say, listen, here are my experiences at Portland State University. This is what they taught me about race. This is what they taught about gender. And we have testimonials from James Claude. And if you could bring some of those up, Reed, it would be great. But that woman, Catholic woman, she can't, and I'm an atheist. So it's not like I'm, championing Catholicism. So how do we get a list of people like that, of donors, and we can encourage people to go to and tell them what's happening so that they can stop donating? Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, as I said, I'm like, yes, right? If you have an organization that's focused on Portland State and you can find that information, which is not easy, right? That is a way to do it. In fact, at some point, I mean, I've thrown that in my whiteboard of ideas for things that AFSA could do when we have the capability to get around to something like that. I think one of the things really that I talk to people in AFSA about is what I keep coming back to is this yes and, right? There is no silver bullet. I hear repeatedly, if only we could do this, if only if we could get this rule, if only we could get the right president when we get the next one, right?
No.
And I'm like, none of it matters. I'll go back to my military background. There's a concept called synchronization, which really involves pre-planning in a way to bring all of your available, put it in this context, levers of influence on the target. So if you can pressure them through the press with alumni, yes, you do it. If you can change the legal structure so that they have less room to maneuver, yes, do it. If you can affect donations, yes, do it. Right?
Okay.
You need to bring all of those to bear.
We are in lockstep, in absolute lockstep in agreement with that. Yes, and I'll yes and you. I wrote about that in my book. That's from Improv Comedy. Yes, and there does seem to, yeah, that's right. There does seem to be a hierarchical prioritization of the best ways to punish the purveyors of madness. And it seems to me that if we're going to use the alumni to do that, and I think that is among the best ways, then what do we use the alumni to do? We use them to dry up. I think that's what you said about Dorian Abbott and MIT. And we have Dorian's become a friend of mine. We just published a paper together in the Journal of Controversial Ideas about merit in science. Reed, if you could pull that up at some point, that'd be great. And so one of the things that's been interesting about that is, so are you familiar with Dorian Abbott as just like a thinker and intellectual?
I mean, I understand and I've read several of his publications on not the technical exoplanetary stuff.
I can't understand that stuff either. It's way over my head. But he's a founding faculty member. I'm pretty sure he's a founding faculty member at the University of Austin. Just savagely smart, super good guy. But anyway, he's at the University of Chicago. But I only bring him up because in the context of cancellation. So there's a hierarchy then of things that we can do that are effective. You tell me what you think of this. Maybe we disagree about this because this falls under the rubric of synchronization. The first is stop donating until, so you have to put a kind of an until in there, or you just stop donating and you give to the University of Austin, you give to Ralston, you give to institutions that are genuinely committed to free speech, which is fine, until you abolish the office of DEI. If you abolish the office of DEI, I will consider donating again. And okay, so that's at an individual donor level. But I want to specifically talk to you about how do you get the list? So let's go back to Portland State University. So let's say I'm a student. I graduated from Portland State University. I was aghast at the madness, the fact that I couldn't voice my opinion, the fact that I was belittled because I was white or the color of my skin or what have you, or Arab or Muslim. How do I go about getting a donor list of the top 100 donors and scheduling meetings with them to explain my experiences?
That I can't tell you, other than you need that active group that can keep digging and trying and finding it. So and this is the key thing. This is one of the key factors that kind of shapes how AFSA tries to work is every university and every situation is different. So for example, we have some members that have a fair, when I say members, I mean our organization, since we're a umbrella group. So, the free speech oriented group at a particular university would be a AFSA member. We have some that really just have good relations with the university. We have some that have bad relations with the university, and some that have bad relations have developed a series of sources and moles in the administration that will feed them information. That's how you get the donor list. You have to find people.
Great.
You need to find people that have it. I mean, really, and I actually work with a gentleman who's retired from a certain government agency. And one of the things that he actually taught and did was recruiting sources, right? How do you cultivate a relationship? So that's what you need to do, right? This is a counterinsurgency, and you need to think about it and run it as one.
God, I'm so happy, Chuck. I'm so happy you said that. That is absolutely 100% correct. So a video here. I don't think that's her, Reed. it's like a Hispanic woman. She was basically in tears talking about her experiences. And I'm going to play that for you and ask you to comment on that. So I guess the other strategy then is, how do we elevate the voices of alumni to speak out? And again, I'm just using Portland State, but you can use any place you want, because that's the place where I'm most familiar with. And it was on, I think it was the 2020 Fire's list of worst offenders, something like that. How do we elevate the voices?
Columbia's holding, Mr. Atlas again, apparently.
Yeah. So how do we elevate the voices of those people and get their testimonials out to as many people as possible?
Well, that's what AFSA is trying to do, right? We have three goals that I can talk through at different points here. The first one of which is to grow the number of chapters, help and support, be that incubation, the seed to get people, to motivate people to actually form a group focused on their university. We'd love you to help us start a group there at Portland State among the alumni and get them involved. And then once they got a basic organization, we help them put a website together that we then move on and say, okay, what are the things that you can do? How can you be active? How can you make an impact? And again, that will be different at every university. So for example, I'll go back to my MIT experience, and I stumbled totally backwards into this. I had no intention of getting involved in this at all. It just happened because I saw what was happening at MIT. Well, we organized a debate on whether academic DEI programs should be abolished. We had it live streamed on YouTube. It's had 27,000 views so far. And I had the head of the MIT Alumni Association ask me in a nice email exchange why we were against DEI. And I gave the officially correct answer, which we as an organization don't have a position on DEI, right? We, as an AFSA member, our mantra is free speech, academic freedom, and viewpoint diversity. But then I pointed out to her, we didn't pick the topic. You picked the topic when you canceled Dorian Abbott because of his views on DEI. And then I've been known to get a little cheeky sometimes. And I told her, if you had canceled him because of his views on gods, guns, or panda bears, we'd be having a debate on God, guns, or panda bears. And just to make sure she got the point, and the next time that you attempt to shut down debate on a topic, we will ensure that there is a robust discussion of whatever topic on campus. Right. So again, a part of that strategy is to inculcate a sense of futility.
Yeah, as long as people understand that this is a war of attrition and it's the last man standing. In this counterinsurgency, it is attrition. And that's what the ideological enemies of reason, decency, and enlightenment values count on, is they count on people being spineless and capitulating or remaining silent. And very few people I found can endure the relentless harassment of the DEI bureaucracy, whether they're faculty or the minions of the DEI bureaucracies. Okay, Reed's going to play you a clip of a young woman and Billboard Chris. That's Billboard Chris over there on the left, and that's James Klug, who is a famous YouTuber. And the testimonials here are rather remarkable. And the fact that people are covering their faces should say it all. And this is at Portland State University. I think it was this year. Go ahead, Reed. Thank you.
Inclusion, diversity.
I know two other people who share my views, and we're both quiet about it. We don't share our views because we know that the teacher is not going to support us. And even if the teacher doesn't support us, that's fine. We know that there's 30 other students around us who don't support us either.
So when someone attempts to take away your voice, like this person is doing to my right, and create an unsafe environment, how does that make you feel?
Scared. I like I said, I don't know how this is going to play out, and I don't know if I should just go home. So
I'm genuinely sorry about that. I'm genuinely sorry
for being brave.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for doing this.
Really sorry to hear that, and thank you. I think on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for speaking with us. That was amazing stuff.
Again, thank you so much for doing all of this.
I
really appreciate it.
So there's a young woman who is a student at Portland State, who was literally in tears and cried afterward. She can't voice, she's literally paying for an education that she's not getting. How do we, I would love to figure out some way. I think this will be effective. I'm very sure this will be effective. I'd love your opinion on it, but how could we elevate people's voices like that, excuse me, and let donors know that there are students on campus who are being discriminated against because of their beliefs?
You have to step into the arena. I'm a big fan of Teddy Roosevelt's speech on the man in the arena, and get out there and do it. In fact, I heard a lady say not too long ago, in referencing to that speech, if you're not also in the arena, I'm not really interested in your feedback, right? Unless you're out there striving, trying to do this. There's a lot of good ideas. That is the number one. And again, most of the people that I know that are involved in this alumni free speech movement have no background in nonprofit work. They're coming from business. Some of them are retired academics. Most of, we have people that are serial startups, ex-CEOs, attorneys. So this is the idea of just getting involved and we're figuring this out, right? And the point is, there isn't a playbook that's applicable everywhere. But again, get yourself organized, get a group, have a conference, have an event, get your name out there, because once you become the rallying point for people that are concerned about this, they will start to come, right? Build it and they will come. People know that I'm not the only one. I have to keep my mouth shut on campus. I don't know who else agrees with me. I might have or might not have a few close friends. But once people start realizing that, no, I'm not alone. Yes, this is
right.
wrong.
100%. And getting that woman's testimony to as many alumni as possible is just indispensable for what I would see as I'm trying to think of those little balls, and it's like that one ball knocks the ball and they all stand still except the final ball, which is the final ball is like the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, just kicking it off. And then, going back to the next ball. Okay, we've got a super chat. What we got? Question. Ooh, great question. Wonderful. Common ground for $5. Wonderful. This is what I'm talking about. See, I have great audience. Should we be working at the level of boards of accreditation? I love that question.
That too. Yes, and
100%. So what would that look like? Like how, or do you feel qualified or competent to speak to the basics of the fundamentals of what that would look like?
How to influence? Well, look, we can talk about a problem, and then at times I will just simply make the point of, I don't know the answers, but I know we're not asking the right questions. These are the questions we need to focus on. And if we can get people to ask the right questions, I don't have to have all the right answers. There are plenty of smart people out there. But more importantly than smart is people that will try. You need the 1,000 different efforts and make this a very decentralized fight. And maybe we can come back later to some of the ways I want to try to do that. So for example, the one thing I do know, and I'm not an expert on it, but Florida has sued the federal government over the accreditation system. Are you
correct? Yes.
And they have a, I'm not sure how well it will play in the court. It appears to be a coherent argument as to the extent that I understand it, in terms of you're outsourcing to a private party the ability to make decisions about who's eligible for federal funds or not, which seems to violate certain legal precedents. But regardless of the logic, we all know, what a court will do is still a coin toss. But we also really know that the underlying reason they did that is because the accreditors are putting in requirements that are not related to academic rigor. In fact,
correct. In fact, they're antithetical to academic rigor.
Yeah. Okay. In fact, I will tell you this. I happen to be from Alabama, and I was recently down and spent several weeks there. I have a family member who's extremely well connected, former elected official. And I know that Alabama recently passed some legislation to, not nearly to the extent of Florida, but to sort of fight, woke DEI at some of the universities. And they carved out specific language that said, unless required to meet accreditation standards. And the reason they did that, I have it on very good authority, is because the university presidents came in and said, if we did exactly what you're saying, we will lose our accreditation.
Correct.
At some point, I think the answer has to be, okay, if that's what it takes to be accredited, you're not going to be accredited. And then we'll deal with that.
Yeah, I've always thought it's a racket. Who accredits the accreditors? The whole thing is one big, it's not a Ponzi scheme, but it's similar to a Ponzi scheme.
Someone I know refers to that type of arrangement as the self-licking ice cream cone.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Okay, so we have accreditation, and I've learned a little bit about that. I've been involved in that peripherally because I've taught at many institutions, and I've helped some of the early institutions get ready for accreditation. And I've seen a little bit of that through the University of Austin, which is a really fascinating process. I think it's a rather large racket, but that's a conversation for another day. Okay, so let me tell you what I think. I think you're going to disagree with me, but that's fine. This free speech. You're push back on this.
It would be boring if we didn't.
Yeah, push back on me if you think that this is wrong. I have not only have I given up on all colleges and universities, institutions, because if they were really serious, they would just get rid of DEI boards. Anything that they do that doesn't do that tells me that they're not serious, or tells me that they've prioritized their values at free speech as being secondary to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that we should let the universities and institutions crumble. I think, with all due respect, that anybody who spends time, and a lot of my friends are in this space, there was a thing at Stanford that I didn't go to that was, how do we save free speech? Pinker was there. A lot of people friends, people I respect.
I had an invitation, I believe. I couldn't make it.
Yeah, people I respect, people are there. With all of that said, I think it is doomed to fail. And I think that the better alternative is to build new things. Now, I want to say one quick thing. I'm not telling them not to do that. Like, if that's the way that folks want to spend their time, great. But I think that any attempt at that solution, to put all of your eggs in one basket, given the severity of the crisis and a looming, China and all of these global competitions, and our engines of knowledge production, the universities have been basically crippled by this madness, to be all in on thinking that you can revise a system that I am completely convinced is irredeemably broken seems foolhardy to me. And it seems that at least we'll disagree on the percentage, but a very significant amount of effort needs to be spent on building new institutions.
Having new institutions coming up, particularly with that explicit purpose, helps get the attention of the existing ones. I don't know yet, as I think was a Yogi Bear making predictions is always difficult, especially about the future. So, the outcome of this battle, we don't know. I mean, I'm in it, I'm in the fight, and the condition I had for taking the job was, I'm not here to keep the warm seat and go on the red carpet. We're here to win, right? Good. And sometimes that's going to upset a few people. But the point is, that battle is easier the more these alternative institutions grow. And I think it's actually
100%. Yeah. And not only grow, but have to.
Peter, I could say, but it's also a very right time for that, because if you look at the demographics and the economics, they're like, universities are going out of business by the hundreds a year. And so now, is Harvard and Yale going to go out of business? Not anytime soon. However, I'll go back to my counterinsurgency analogy. And this is why, yes, okay, stop donating, give to an alternate source. Is that sufficient? Not in a million years. But, if you go back to Mao and read his book on guerrilla warfare, the population is the sea that the guerrilla fish swims in, right? The point is that you have a small band of dedicated ideologues, and you have a population that's just sympathetic enough to not tell the army where you are, right? That's what you need. And
Right.
the same thing exists on university campuses where you've got a few hardcore ideologues and everyone else is just convinced it's easier to just not say anything and go along with them. Now, we can debate what percentage that is, right? But the point is, you're never going to convince them, and they're never going to change because of donations. You need enough strategy to get the publicity so that the other 95% start being more and more willing to speak up. You need the other alternatives to make it more imperative that they realize that something has to change, and we got to deal with these problematic people. And again, there's another area I want to get to around making where you can make changes, make them in a strategic and sticky way so that you start incrementally building the rights of students and changing the rules of the game so that there's a more meaningful and personal impact on the person that actually goes and violates your rights. And so, and again, sorry for the long-winded answer, but one of the phrases I've already heard in response to people, some of the changes in Florida and Texas, which aren't all necessarily the best thing to do, but just sort of as a general statement, people are saying, university professors and administrators are now saying, well, I'm afraid. It's a feature, not a defect.
Correct.
Right. The point being is these people
100%.
These people are public administrators. I want them to be concerned that what they do may violate a student, staff, or faculty's rights, particularly at a public university. In the same way that when I'm pulled over by a policeman, I want that policeman trained on my rights, trained to respect those rights, and actually concerned that he does that, right? How is that policeman any different from a college president or dean?
Okay, let me ask you a question then. Let's say that I gave you a magic wand, and you can wave this magic wand and do 3 things to colleges and universities to help ameliorate the derangement syndrome or to increase free speech. What would you do? So you can't wave the magic wand and say there's more free speech. You have to wave the wand and something changes, like a policy changes. Yeah. So you have the magic wand, there you are, you wave it. And what are the 3 things?
Again, it depends on sort of the level that you want to go. I'll give you one, and I didn't make this idea up. This is actually very concrete. You could actually do it. I want to make it easier for people to push back. You've heard me say that several times. So, if you think about why don't they push back, it's too hard, it's too expensive, it takes too long, etc. Well, rewrite the rules so it doesn't, right? So, for example, if I could go down to my local municipal court and sue the dean for infringing my speech, and I've got a trial date in 45 days instead of 2 years, and I don't have to pay anything to file it, instead of having to hire a lawyer and file in federal court, and I have specified damages, so I actually get money and attorney's fees rather than just an injunction to tell them to stop. Now, all of a sudden, everybody's incentivized to fight back, right? And
okay,
all of a sudden,
sorry. So just for the listeners, so summarize that in 2 sentences.
Lower the bars to actually taking legal action against people who are violating the law.
Excellent. Okay, so that's the first thing. What's the second thing?
I would make receipt of federal funds contingent on certifying annually that you haven't come up with a free speech code of conduct around the lines of you haven't taken any action against a student for protected speech. You haven't canceled an invited speaker. Come up with your basic, hard to argue with, basic code of conduct, and the general counsel and the president have to sign off every year that you haven't in the last year, and you're promising that you won't in the next year to retain eligibility for federal funds.
I love that. I love that. I will say, so, I run a nonprofit and I'm not allowed to endorse candidates. And I really try to make this, and I think you'll agree with this. I don't think that this is or should be a Democrat, Republican, conservative. This is an American. These are Enlightenment. This should be the least political thing around, right?
I remember. I'm old enough to remember, and I think I'm younger than you. I'm old enough to remember when card-carrying member of the ACLU was, like an insult to a liberal, right? A Republican might say that. In fact, I think George Bush called Dukakis, a card-carrying ACLU member. Well, the ACLU was the premier defender of free speech. I mean, we're both old enough to remember the Nazis in Skokie, Illinois, right? They went to court to defend the right of the American Nazi Party to march through this neighborhood. Everybody remembers that. If they do, probably because of the Blues Brothers, right? But they've simply lost the thread.
Okay.
Right. It's not a conservative issue. It's not a Republican issue.
100%. 100. So I absolutely love your second point. My only concern, and again, I'm trying not to make this political. I sincerely am trying not to make this political, is that will have far more cachet and that will have far more weight. And I'm not even going to say the name of the party, but if there was a certain party in office, then if there's another party in office, would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have that solution itself, which I love, is embedded in a larger political discourse.
And I didn't, by the way, Peter, neither of those two ideas are mine. I actually borrowed those. So for example,
I love them.
So for example, the Telecommunications Privacy Act, which nobody's heard of, but it's the law that outlaws robocalls, right? It has a little known feature that allows you to sue a robocaller, and you can sue, even though it's under the federal law, you're allowed to sue in your state court, which means you can go to small claims court. And it also says that you get what's called specified damages. In other words, I don't have to prove the damages. It's a $500 per call, right? Because you called me, I'm on the do not call list, give me my money, right? I have actually sued people over this when you can find out who they are. So this is a no BS, this is legit, it actually works. If you just took that same principle and applied it to free speech at a university, because I don't have to hire a lawyer that can file in federal court and wait 2 years, I get nothing for it other than an injunction, or more likely, a motion to drop the case because it's moot because I've graduated, right? It's the way I phrase it is I want the treasurer and the general counsel to be the first guys lining up outside the president's office, yelling at him that you've got to make them stop.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, we have a super chat, but before we do that, what's your third point? You have the wand, you wave it, what happens?
I would have to think about the right way to state it, because you know the movies that genie gives you exactly what you ask for and you don't phrase it right, but really around removing programs and degrees and departments that are really focused on activism and not academics.
Anything with the word studies in it would fall into that.
Most likely.
That's the reason that I don't think any efforts for free speech will ultimately succeed, because and I've said this 10,000 times, not 1,000 times, because you have ideologues who have jobs for life. They have tenure. They influence the university disproportionately. They've weaponized offices that they themselves have supported, if not directly responsible for establishing, that they bypass traditional lines of academic governance and go right to the president. I mean, the whole thing is a fiasco. All right, but
that's why you have to find the means to really put the squeeze on the people who can actually, or in structurally, organizationally, in the position to stand up. You have to make it more painful for the president, the dean, administrator, to turn around and deal 100%. With people.
No, I completely agree. I completely agree. That's why two things. One, we started the stop donating to your alumni. Like if you want to solve this, like the best thing you can do is literally the easiest thing in the world. Don't give these people money. These people are tyrants. These people are vicious ideologues who are teaching our kids divisive madness. Stop funding that fucking machine. Okay, the second thing is find a list of large donors, get that list, and then go to them in person. Elevate voices like that young woman on the screen who was in tears because she couldn't speak freely at Portland State. Like find those people, go physically schedule appointments and go into their offices. Okay, Reed, let's do.
Go ahead.
Let's do the super chat. Read. Jocko Splitnik, 499. Hey, thanks. I'm 47 in Austin. I'm about to move to Austin a little bit. In community college, I want to teach high school. History department is captured. Correct. Recommended reading.
Okay. Well, my sister and brother-in-law are both history professors or former history professors. My brother-in-law is a former dean, written several textbooks. There is plenty of good reading out there. If you want a list, I can ask, right? I would first question would be, at what level? Are you looking for a survey course? Are you looking for a Western Civ? Right?
I know it's outside my area. I love Neil Ferguson. He's full disclosure, he's a friend of mine. He's my favorite historian. I've often wondered why people call some people a liberal or conservative historian, but yeah, I think I'm not the right person to ask that question to. I apologize. I'm just an armchair reader.
I will say the real answer though is just read. Reading one thing leads to another.
100%. I say backing that up is writing too. I found the process of writing to be important, but the process of editing to be even more important than that. Okay, cool. So for people listening to this who have graduated from college and are alumni at some institution, what would you tell them? What is your advice to them?
You have to speak up. If you've been making donations, call your alumni department and tell them why you're stopping.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
Right.
That's great.
You have to call them and tell them why you're stopping. The next thing is go to joinafsa.org and register, and we'll put you in touch with other alumni and help you start a chapter at your organization, at your university, to get involved and organize so that you can have a louder voice.
Can you spell that, please?
Join AFSA, JOINAFSA.org.
Alumni Free Speech Alliance. Excellent.
The Alumni Free Speech Alliance. This is the current National Review Special Education Edition. I hate to. Thank you very much. I hate to say, let me give a shout out to Barack Obama here. I mean, community organizer. That's what it's all about, is get involved, find like-minded people. That's what we're here to do, is try to be out there to help you, and then go make noise, right? And the great thing about AFSA, one of the things that we do in terms of supporting groups is just the networking between groups. So just like an individual learning that I'm not alone here, the other alumni feel the same way. Being able to talk to other people in similar situations in other groups and learn from their experience. We got so many examples where that has tremendously paid off. So for example, there were stories in the Wall Street Journal a few months ago about the Stanford protected harm identity system and how they had this anonymized reporting, and they're basically begging you to report on your fellow students, right? That article in the journal happened because people at Stanford didn't like what was happening. And it was people at another university through the alumni network that said, hey, I know a reporter. Right. And it was one of the things that helped lead to Stanford taking a tactical step back. Now, they didn't really change their heart and soul, right? But those little I compare this to the Ukrainian counteroffensive. Lots of fighting everywhere, little progress up and down the line, but no major breakthrough yet. Right. And that's one of the things that we're trying to identify as the initiatives that we can really focus on and get some high visibility, materially significant achievements, to be the tip of the spear and actually start demonstrating that real progress can be made.
Yeah, I think that's great. Okay. So in conclusion, where can people find you personally? Do you have like a Twitter or social medias?
No, AFSA has a Instagram and YouTube channel.
Okay.
So
okay.
you can
cool. So
there.
they can go there and Reed put that up on the screen. Okay, Chuck, we definitely appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Don't close out the chat because we're going to talk and it's going to finish uploading. So thanks everybody for listening, and thanks for the super chats, and thanks for Chuck. And I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate your mission in bringing free speech and open inquiry back to our institution.